Welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Joey Clark, and as promised, we have right across the desk from me, Dick Brewbaker. So the campaign seems to be going well, sir.
I think it is. I was very pleased to get Wallace Gilberry's endorsement when he decided to end his campaign, and General Flynn is somebody I've always admired. My son is an active duty ranger at Fort Benning. Fort Moore. He's in the 3rd Ranger Battalion, and Flynn is one of those guys he really respects as an active duty soldier, and I was very flattered, and I think it's going well. But the thing is, my pollster told me that 60% of likely Republican voters aren't sure what district they're in.
Oh no!
When you get down in the southern part of the state, the line between the Wiregrass and Montgomery have always been linked in these congressional districts. Well, now they're not. The Wiregrass is mostly in District 1. So when you get down there in southern Alabama, toward, Bullock and even Clark and Mobile County, a lot of people don't know even what congressional district they're in. And, Barrymore and Jerry Carl were both at this Mobile event last night.
Right.
And you could tell there was a lot of confusion among people about whether they're going to be voting in the 2nd congressional district or the 1st. So that's an interesting little twist to this race that.
Well, it makes me think, though, that, and I don't know if your pollster looked at, do the Democrats know where the new district is?
No, they don't. There's just a lot of voter confusion. And unfortunately, to all my Republican friends out there, whether you vote for me or not, and I think you should vote for me, but if you're not, please go vote. This district is just a leaning D district. I mean, the Republicans can certainly win it, but we're not going to win it with 30% turnout.
Right.
And the problem we have as conservatives is we talk a great game, but we don't vote. If you look at all of the counties in the 2nd district, they don't consistently turn out at above 30%. And we have got to change that. I mean, we don't have to let the Democrats take this country, but we do have to go vote. And so tell your friends at church and at your hunting camp and whatever you're involved in, get on them and tell them to go vote. It just kills me that we're giving up. We may lose Congress because only 3 out of 10 of us show up to vote.
Now, what is it like? It's one thing to just decide to run for Congress, but you're running for Congress in this new district that you just laid out, and also in probably one of the craziest presidential election years we've ever seen. So I guess what I'm asking about is, what did you think of what happened last night in Iowa? And if you do get the nomination, I mean, what do you expect to be seeing?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Trump performing well is great for me, because one thing that Trump has shown is that when Trump is on the ticket, conservative Republicans, the same sort of people who will vote for me, are more energized and more likely to go to the polls. And my biggest worry was that somehow the Trump campaign, either because of legal action, the Biden administration is trying to act like Putin, throw his political opponents off the ballot, that something would happen and keep Trump off of the top of the Republican ticket. And it looks like that's not going to happen. And I hope that it's a Trump-Biden rematch, because if you look at Democrat voter enthusiasm for Joe Biden, not so great. And with Trump at the top of our ticket, and if conservatives get energized and go to the polls, the Republicans are going to win the 2nd congressional district, and that Republican is going to be me. I hope. But I thought Iowa was fantastic, and I'm not saying anything bad about any of the other candidates, but speaking as a candidate, Trump at the top of our ticket energizes people, and that raises our voter turnout. And that's what this is all going to be about.
Amen. Now, I've been asking all the candidates that are coming back for subsequent interviews, is there somebody you've met on the campaign trail that you hadn't ever met before, and like they're just going to stick in the mind? Like there's such a character, you're like, well, you never know what comes up on the campaign trail. You know what I
mean? One thing about, one thing I have learned, and the one reason I'm so pleased to have Wallace Gilberry on my campaign team now, is that no matter how hard you study the issues that affect the port and Mobile, it's a very unique community. And being from Mobile is very important to the people who live there. I mean, they have a tremendous amount of community pride.
Right.
And the "you're not from here and can we trust you" is a huge issue. And I have met, I've gotten a lot of great invitations to Mardi Gras, and I plan to take them up on that. I've never been to a Mardi Gras in Mobile, and I'm told that's the oldest and the best. So I'm going to find out.
You know, my uncle's the vicar of the cathedral down there.
How awesome is that?
And so he's got some pretty good Mardi Gras connections. I'll have to set you two up. Like he knows
I would like to meet him.
Yeah, he knows the grounds down there. He hates when I call him though Monsignor William J. Skinner.
Well.
He's just called me Uncle Bill. But yeah, it is a different part of and this is what the courts decided to do makes it so frustrating, is that I think it is a little bit of a different culture than we have right here in Montgomery. But I mean, we're all Alabamians at the end of the day, all Americans at the end of the day. But you're kind of getting to know, and it's back to your initial point that it seems like this redraw of the map sort of took away the normal political communities people are used to.
Right.
So this is just a complete redraw, and maybe that's a opportunity.
Well, I hope it is, but I don't understand the Wiregrass. It would make more sense to me for that, because their interests are so with agriculture, and the military all throughout that region. It makes sense for them all to be in the same congressional district, and they're not anymore. And that has created some confusion. But one thing that does encourage me, Republicans at least understand that the things that are hurting families right now, inflation in the food sector, are all being driven not by external forces, but by Biden administration policies. Grotesque overspending, this insane war on the fossil fuel industry that's driven up energy costs, which makes food more expensive. I mean, when you've got things like butter, sugar, eggs, up over 30% from a year ago, that makes it harder on people trying to raise their kids, feed them and educate them. And not only that, inflation devalues not only your wages, but your savings. And we can fix all of that if we have people with some sense in Congress. The one thing that concerns me is, as Republicans, we've got to unite behind our candidate, especially the president. And I don't have anything against the Freedom Caucus or anybody else, but you can't treat your own party as your primary enemy, because when the primary's over, you can't get all the spaghetti back on the fork before the general, and that helps Democrats.
Well, and I want to underline something. You just brought it up. I believe in an interview with Todd Stacey, you talked about how you wouldn't want to join, say, Freedom Caucus or take Club for Growth money. Well, and I suspect, I'm somebody who I think ideologically aligns with those folks. But from what my takeaway wasn't that you were knocking any particular policy.
No, not at all.
Thing. It was more a matter of, lay it out. Why wouldn't you want to take that money?
If the question is, will I vote with the Freedom Caucus? Yeah.
Okay.
But will I join it? The answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Giving your word to somebody is very important, at least to me. And if you join a caucus, what you're saying is, for the benefits I get from being a member of your caucus, if you take a caucus position and you get more than 2/3 of the caucus to say this is what we should do, you're going to vote with them whether you think it's right for your district or not. And I'm not going to hand my voting card over to anybody, regardless of how much I like them. And with the Club for Growth, I support free trade. But if I'm representing District 2, what they call free trade, a lot of Alabama family shrimpers call dumping from China, Taiwan, Vietnam. And I'm not going to sacrifice $1 billion Alabama seafood industry for the opinion of a bunch of economists, based in Wisconsin. I mean, I'm just not going to do that. And so, like with with the with the Freedom Caucus especially, I agree with all their principles,
Sure.
but I'm not handing my voting card over to anybody for any reason.
Well, that makes sense to me. And I know I've heard a little bit of your opinion over the last, these years are all flowing together since COVID. But, all the craziness with Matt Gaetz and vacating the chair. And now even I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is threatening to vacate Mike Johnson now. Like, what do you make of the dysfunction within the Republican Party within the House right now?
That's the culture we've got to get. We need to take a long, hard look at the rules in the House that enable, let's face it, if you've got 7 Republicans voting with 208 Democrats to topple a Republican speaker, and with no plan for what happens if you're successful. That's the thing that surprised me about Matt when he did this. When they interviewed him after they toppled their speaker, he clearly had no plan for what happened next. Right. It was just sort of a, political bomb throwing to create chaos. Now, if you're creating chaos for Joe Biden, great. But if you're destroying your own party's ability to govern, that's not so good. And we have, the America I grew up in, the America I want my boys to be able to raise their boys in, is under siege. And we are in real danger of losing it. And the only people on Capitol Hill that make any sense at all are Republicans. And we can't have these circular firing squads and not pay a price for it. And we have got to be willing to call people that we vote with 90% of the time our friends and not our enemies. And because I'm telling you, the Democrats want to destroy the middle class. And, I know there's some Republicans that don't like Donald Trump, and he may have been wrong about some things, but there's a lot of things he was right about. Like in 2015, when he started talking about the border, only about 30% of Republicans placed it as a top issue. But in 2015, only about 750 Americans a year were dying of fentanyl overdoses. Now we've got 750 Americans dying of fentanyl every 4 or 5 days.
Right.
And, the last month we have numbers for 400,000 illegal entries. That's a city the size of Pittsburgh. It swamps our social services. It displaces Americans. And it puts us as a nation at a gigantic security risk. We have Republicans who got to join together and put a stop to it. And we can't do that if we're constantly spending more energy fighting each other than we are fighting the Democrats, who are the ones trying to destroy the country, at least destroy the America that I know anything about.
Right. And it's really unnerving to see. He changed the conversation on the border, Trump did.
Yep.
But also in China, I would say. I think there's still folks holding on to that dream of, it starts with Nixon, really gets going in the 90s. If we make China rich, they'll be just as liberal as us. And it just didn't happen. And Trump was the first to really call it out.
Well, and if you read, magazines about government policy, what's really scary is the number of very serious writers who write about national defense who consider war with China inevitable. And, as a person with a son who's active duty military, I find that very disturbing. But that's the world that we live in. And, you've got to recognize the realities of the world situation, not just wish it was something else. But if we're going to take on China, we have to have a strong economy, a strong defense, and not only that, we have to be energy independent. And while the Biden administration talks a great game when it comes to hemming China in, when it comes to actually getting the country in a position where we could win a war with China, especially since it'll be a regional war on the other side of the world.
Right.
You're not going to win that war trying to have electric tanks. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I saw those reports too. They want
It's
to
crazy.
electrify everything in the military, and and every time I see those meetings between high-level Chinese delegates and the U.S. president, it like Tony Blinken looks scared straight. He looks like he's the one who crapped his pants. Excuse me,
Well,
pardon me.
let's put it this way. You have got to take governing very seriously if you're going to be in government. It's more than talking about, if I'm going to fight for Alabama values, I'm going to fight for our families. Those are great things to say, but what do they really mean?
Right.
And if you're the president of the United States, if you're going to put us on a collision course with a nuclear power, you better get ready to win it. And you're not going to win that war if you cripple your own economy through your energy policies. And here's the thing, I'm not a scientist. I don't know a lot about global warming or climate change or whatever they call it these days. But I do know this. Our government is making the middle class and working families pay the price for switching to electric. But last year, China burned more coal than at any time in their history. And China and India both are still building coal-fired plants as fast as they can. And it seems to me that if these issues were as crucial as Biden says they are, that maybe China wouldn't enjoy most favored nation trade status with us right now. We would be trying to penalize them, but we're not at all, not even a little bit. What we're doing is putting American industry at a disadvantage, and it's not political elites that pay the price for this. They're still flying around in their jets. It's just regular Americans paying more for butter, eggs, and sugar.
There you go. And as we were just reporting before you came in, the inflation ain't gone.
No.
Like, it's here to stay. I mean, the last numbers coming out of December were not good. And a lot of folks I trust, we'll see what happens, are saying we're kind of replaying the 70s where it looked like they had inflation whooped and then it came back with a vengeance.
Well, they always, and here's the thing, they're playing a little game with the way they report it. If you talk about inflation over the whole economy, you may be able to build a case that it's 9 or 10%. But if you look at the basket of basic groceries, like I say, in the food sector, because it's so sensitive to transportation costs, you're looking at more like between 20 and 30%.
Right.
And this is not sustainable for working Americans. I mean, it's just like Biden creates a situation where he encourages, there are 8 million American men between 18 and 54 who not only are not in the workforce, they have no plans to be,
right,
because the government is paying them not to work. And then at the same time, the Biden administration uses that, a situation they created, to justify allowing all these illegal entries. I mean, they're trying to replace working class Americans with a group that's totally dependent on government services for their very existence in this country. That is not good for the middle class.
It is not whatsoever. We got to hit a break here, but when we come back, I don't know if you've been listening to me, pardon me, bitch and moan about, I'm proud of the things I write for 1819 News, but I can never get, I haven't been on trending in months. And, well, I'm not just on trending today, folks, if I can toot my own horn. I've been #1 all day at 1819, and that might have something to do with the title of my op-ed. The Army's excuse for recruitment failures.
Oh, yeah.
Too many fat, stupid, drug-addicted bigots.
Yeah, that was a great headline. I saw that this morning.
And, well, I was amazed when I saw, how I came up with that headline when I saw some of the excuse making being made by anonymous Army officials. Well, I kind of want to ask you about that and pick your brain on why the recruitment is such an issue right now. I think the Army in particular is 25,000 short of what they were hoping to get over the last 2 years.
Right. And it's because red-blooded American boys don't want to join a woke military.
Yeah, well, amen. So I've got to hit this break. Be right back. More with Dick Brewbaker after this. If you want to comment or have a question, 272-9228.
Joey Clark.
Welcome back to News and Views in the afternoon. Again, in studio with me, we have Dick Brewbaker. He is a candidate now running for Congress, former state senator. Now, I think I asked you this first time you stopped by, and we'll get to the recruitment question in a second, but When you got out after 2 terms there in the Alabama Senate, do you ever expect to get back into politics?
No, no, I didn't. I really wanted to run for a 3rd term, but your word's got to be your bond. Keep your name in good condition. But once I got out, I think, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
But in 2018, I didn't think the Republic was in danger of failing.
Right.
And having grandkids, sort of lengthens your perspective about what you think your responsibilities are. And we are in real jeopardy if we don't turn this thing around. And I don't think we have all that long to do it. The Democrats obviously don't want to control these illegal entries over the southern border, or they would have controlled it. If they wanted to stop it, it would have been stopped. And the reason is their plan is to hand all of these people driver's licenses and IDs and let them vote. And instead of having American citizens having to make their case to try to elect Democrats to Congress, they're going to bring in people that aren't Americans and flip Congress. And it is, our basic institutions of government are under threat, and mainly because they're just battering people with a series of lies. All this talk about, white supremacy, it's just their way to justify discriminating against young whites, especially males. Mm-hmm. And my youngest son is a 3rd-year student in Alabama. And when he was going through the college admissions process, just the frank admission from recruiters from various schools about how you're not going to get in, not because of your grades or because of your test scores. It's just that you're a white male and that puts you at a disadvantage. And some of them were extremely frank.
Yeah, and it's frustrating to see because I ran into, even at Auburn University, I ran into some of that woke stuff in my classes. But I thought, well, I mean, nobody's going to read this stupid stuff by Bell Hooks. By the way, don't capitalize her name. It's always a lowercase b and h. But I always thought, oh, this is nonsense, and I can go on living my life. And then it turns out those folks who believe that nonsense end up running, corporate suites and, HR departments and a lot of aspects of the government, including DEI ones within the military.
Well, when you hire a person to be a DEI director, and let's face it, if you're going to hire people based on their skin color, that means you're not hiring them based on who's best for the job.
Right.
And while discrimination is wrong and everybody ought to have an equal shot, but that doesn't mean everybody's equally qualified. And when you apply it to things like the military, that's where, if we're going to be on a collision course with China, it seems to me concerning that the Army can no longer even get close to fulfilling its recruiting goals. And the reason is the government's paying young people to stay out of the job market. So why should they risk their lives by joining the military? And if they're, young men that join the military, at least if the people that serve with my son are typical, and I have no reason to believe they're not, that's because they're patriots. They want to commit their lives to something bigger than just themselves, right. And they want to do something honorable and good. Well, if what they read coming out of the military is all that, this country's bad, this country's more about oppression than anything else. First of all, that's not true.
Right.
But second, it's not the way to get people to sign up. And we're going to have to go back to connecting wages with work. And if we don't, a lot more is going to be at risk than just Army recruitment goals. But I'll tell you this, if you look at the Marines that haven't gone woke, they're meeting their recruiting goals.
There you go. Well, that's a little bit of a controlled experiment then,
yes, there
folks. And again, we're talking to Dick Brewbaker, candidate for Congress. And folks are listening out there and they go, "Ooh, I knew him, but I want to help him in the campaign. If they want to volunteer or donate, how can they do so?"
Well, you can contact us through brewbakerforcongress.com. And if you would like to help with the campaign, either by volunteering or helping with our campaign expenses, it's Brewbaker for Congress, P.O. Box 93, Montgomery 36101.
Now, on the question of war, one thing that I highlighted Army Colonel Current named Overbaugh in my piece I wrote, he said, I think the biggest failure the Army's faced is it's been set up to fail, and that we're asking not just the Army, but a lot of our military to accomplish goals that they can't actually accomplish. And he cites what we did in Afghanistan and what we're doing in many other places in the world. When you look at, say, the recent stuff that's been going on around the map in terms of war, so I guess there was just another strike the U.S. carried out against the Houthis today. It looks like stuff spreading around the Middle East. Who knows? Is it Ukraine in an end game? What are you seeing right now?
First of all, I don't think, before we get overly concerned about securing everybody else's borders, we should probably secure ours.
Hear, hear.
But that said, if we're going to commit military force, let's talk about what the military is and what it's not. The military exists to defend the United States. And if you send them into a foreign country, you better have clear goals about what you think victory looks like and how you're going to get out. What the military is not is they're not social engineers and nation builders. Matter of fact, I mean, let's face it, the military is nation breakers. I mean, that's what all this money's for, breaking things and blowing things up. And the just disgusting and just makes you want to hang your head in shame the way we left Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. All of that is a result of having no clear goals or end games to get our troops out once they were in. And, I'm not on the Foreign Relations Committee. I don't get secret briefings. And I'm, as an old history teacher, I'm very sensitive to the argument that you can't satisfy an aggressive dictator by throwing him a bone. Oh, take Ukraine, then he won't take anything else. I think I'm sensitive to that argument about helping Ukraine. But at the same time, when you get to the point of actually committing American troops, I think the bar needs to be a little higher than it's been in the past. And if we don't have clear goals of what we call winning, and when this happens, we're leaving. And if we don't have that, we shouldn't commit the troops. I mean, it's one thing to I guess, do airstrikes or send supplies, but if you're going to put boots on the ground, you better know what you're doing.
Now, do we need boots on the ground? You mentioned it before on our border. How do we secure our border?
Well, I think the first thing is to declare it an invasion. I mean, if you've got 400,000 people that aren't your citizens coming across your border every month, I think that the federal government can make a case that it's a national emergency, in which case he can use not only the regular military, but he could certainly use the National Guard. If we have to secure our border with using our own military, I think a case can be made for doing that. And I think the president, when you look at the things presidents have gotten away with by executive order, the idea that because of posse comitatus, they can't use the military on the border, I just don't buy it.
Right.
And so, and the other thing is, for people who say, all these people that are here now, there's no way to get them out of the country, I invite them to look at the actions the Eisenhower administration took after World War II. A lot of guest workers had come into the United States during World War II, and then when the war was over, they didn't leave. Well, President Eisenhower showed about 1.3 million of them the door. And, you know, people that are not citizens should not be allowed to just rip off American taxpayers endlessly. And the other thing is, the anchor baby law has got to go. Mm. You know, if you look at other countries, just because you have a baby in their country doesn't make that baby a citizen and give you a right to stay. I mean, we're pretty unique in that regard, and that's got to change.
Yeah, and it actually, when you read that part of it's the 14th Amendment, it says the jurisdiction thereof. So if you're not actually here legally, you're not technically supposed to be our jurisdiction. Like it has to be, yeah, it has to be on a legal basis.
We have to find a way to change that part of the status quo because it just invites abuse.
Now, when you look at, what Congress has been doing with our money, and this is the debt issue, and of course, this is what got ostensibly, at least, Kevin McCarthy in trouble. They didn't follow the normal budgetary process. You'll be one of many up there.
One of many.
But, I mean, what do you make of, why do you think they keep dropping the ball on that?
Well, I think that earmarks is what you're talking about, it's more complicated than it looks. But here's the thing. I think reasonable people may be able to disagree about some of it. But right now, the Biden administration just spent $25 million to fight racism by putting electric scooter chargers in Harlem. That's how he's going to fight. $25 million. Now, I'm sure somebody lobbied for that money.
All right.
Probably somebody that sells electric scooters and electric chargers. But the idea that has anything to do with combating racism is absurd on its face, and earmarks like that should be rejected out of hand. If New York wants to put in electric scooters in a part of their own city, either the city or the state of New York should do that. Now, there are times where earmarks make some sense. Like, take us up in my district. Okay, town of Chickasaw. They keep their town above water and have since the 50s. They have a giant water retention pond, especially at high tides, and 2 giant pumps that pump water in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those pumps were put in the 50s and have just had it. Well, Chickasaw is a little town, little Alabama town. They got government assistance to put those pumps in, and I don't think it's unreasonable for them to ask for, $180,000 to replace them, because if that doesn't happen, the 2/3 of the town are going to be underwater. There's some types of mitigation that only the federal government can do, especially if they are issues dealing with large-scale environmental issues like increasing high tides and issues that cross state lines. It's not like the state of Alabama can mitigate record high tides because it's not just Alabama that's experiencing it. And Republicans just got to be willing to separate the sheep from the goats.
Right.
And that's what's not happening. And I think the reason the speaker got into trouble, he was just viewing it all transactionally. This for you and this for me.
Right.
Well, if what I want is something the federal government shouldn't be involved in anyway, you should tell me no. Right. Even if you tell somebody else yes on something that is an appropriate use of federal money. And we've just got to get back to calling balls and strikes. And the speaker needs to have the guts to do it.
Now, and I might be wrong on this, but one issue I suspect that might be made an issue in the general here in District 2 is the question of abortion. And should it be, there are a lot of different ways we could cut this, but should it be a federal, one-size-fits-all standard? Should the states decide? I mean, where should we go with this?
Here we get to, what you think the Constitution says. If you read the Constitution, and up to Roe v. Wade, it was a state issue. The Reserve Powers Clause, and it was up to the states and their voters to regulate abortion. And that's what, when they overturned Roe v. Wade, they didn't outlaw abortion.
Right.
They just threw it back to the states. Now, if you're asking what I think as Dick Brewbaker, I think that killing babies is wrong. But if you're asking me what I think as someone who reads the Constitution, I think it's a state issue.
Right.
And the Democrats used Roe v. Wade to force a one-size-fits-all on all the states, and it eventually got overturned, and now it's back where it ought to be. And if we want to outlaw abortion in states where it's now legal, we need to get out there and make that case and not try to abuse federal authority,
right,
and force it. I mean, if you believe in states' rights, let's believe in states' rights.
Hear, hear. Well, and if you think about it, folks, like murder is illegal in all the states, but it's regulated at the state level. You don't have a federal law against murder.
Right, exactly right.
And so, yeah, to me, that makes a lot of sense. Do you expect that to be an issue, though,
No,
in the
not
general?
really. I think the Democrats will talk about it and scare people. Republicans want to control your body. But that's just political talk. I think that if you poll Republicans even right now, abortion has dropped off their top 5 or 6 issues, not because they don't think abortion is wrong, but because they view it as settled.
There you go.
And I think Democrats, if you really get down into the data, I think they think the same thing. And let's face it, the Alabama legislature is not going to change Alabama law on abortion. And if the Democrats want to talk about it, that's fine, but they're not going to be successful in federalizing it either.
Right.
So we need to do everything we can to support the pro-life agenda. But I think we also need to respect the Reserve Powers Clause and the authority vested in state governments. And I think the states need to maintain control of those kinds of decisions, because once you let the feds in, you get the most extreme, the most, they have a great ability to choose the wrong road. And so let's keep them out of every area. Education would be another one. I tell you, one of the best actions Congress could take is to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. It was a state function, and as long as you're obeying the laws on anti-discrimination, this federal government should just back off and let the states run their public schools.
And I was going to ask about school choice, but in particular aspect of should there be a federal program, but do you like the idea, let's get back to it's a local school system?
I think, first of all the successful school choice programs have been instituted at the state level.
Right.
And because those are local people trying to affect their own futures. And Alabama, I'll blow my own horn a little bit. Probably one of the most important bills I passed long-term when I was in the legislature was the School Governance Act. Tommy Bice sent out a letter that he was going to now govern not only public schools, but non-public schools. And part of his goal was to get rid of homeschooling. So I sponsored a bill, I think it was Senate Bill 12, but where we put up, we made it very clear that the State Department of Education has no authority to govern non-public schools. And not only that, we gave homeschooling legal protections that are in the code now. So it's not just a matter of sufferance on the part of the state superintendent. Now parents have this legal right. And when it comes to how you educate and raise your own kids, the more choices you give parents, the better off you're going to be. And
Amen.
I know the Democrats always say, well, some charter schools don't provide great educations, and homeschooling's a mixed bag too. Okay, granted. But what are public schools?
Right.
You got right here in Montgomery, the state will give you a list of schools that the state says are abject failures, but nobody talks about shutting them down. So yeah, let parents choose. That's what America's about. Control your own destiny. And I tell you, if the more power parents have in their own children's education, the more involved they're going to be, and that's what you want.
Well, we're pretty much out of time here, but if folks want to, again, like help your campaign, volunteer, give you donations, how can they do so?
Brewbakerforcongress.com. And if you want to talk to me, my cell number is 334-399-5493. And I'll be happy to talk to you about anything having to do with the campaign or issues you're concerned about. If you want to talk to me, give me a call.
Well, appreciate your time as always. Always
Thanks,
great seeing you. And love to see you again soon. Election day will be here before you know it.
I look forward to coming.
Well, y'all stay tuned. We've got more news and views in the afternoon after this quick break.
Want to carry news?